This episode of The Wyatt Sharp Show is proudly brought to you by the team at Texture Communications, your go-to firm for all things public relations and strategic communications. For more information, visit them at yourtexture.com or check the link in the description. Welcome back to Forum Daily News. I'm Wyatt Sharp, and this is your U.S. election tracker update. Well, on Friday night in Phoenix, Arizona, now former independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. officially endorsing former President Donald Trump at a joint campaign rally between Turning Point USA and the Trump campaign just a few hours before the rally as well in a nearby town to Phoenix where the rally was being held. Bobby Kennedy Jr. hosting a campaign presser where he talked about some of the strategies that both of the two campaigns would use to mobilize some of the voters who were supporting Bobby Kennedy to now come out and support former President Donald Trump. Of course, it's also worth mentioning just a few weeks ago, a press call was held by the Kennedy campaign to talk about their efforts to gain ballot access. At the time, they had said they were well on their way to get ballot access in all 50 states, plus the District of Columbia, now essentially making those efforts not important or not valid in any way. And joining me now to discuss it all is former Robert F. Kennedy Jr. campaign senior advisor and political TikTok influencer, Link Lauren. Link, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me. Great to be with you.
Let me just begin with this. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Donald Trump have not mixed words, frankly, between each other over the course of their two respective campaigns. RFK Jr. previously calling Donald Trump, quote, barely human, also calling him a potential sociopath and, quote, the worst president ever. Now, despite these strong statements, the endorsement obviously still happened. Will the endorsement hurt or harm the former president and his campaign?
So the first thing I'll say, Wyatt, politics is a contact sport. You're going to duke it out. You're going to have differences. You're going to say things about each other. But if you can have a meeting of the minds and work together, that's always the best way to go. Look back in 2020, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, they duked it out on the debate stage. She said deplorable things about Joe Biden, and she still ended up being his vice president. She now could potentially be the next president of the United States. So I always say with politics, if you can't handle the heat, don't come into the kitchen because it is a contact sport.
And what about the fact that they still, it seems, are quite far apart on a couple of policy issues? When I interviewed Bobby, he made a lot of references to, for example, his stances on environmental stewardship and what have you, things that it doesn't really seem Donald Trump is putting at the top of his agenda.
So I honestly feel like the differences are what makes them stronger. This is all about a unity ticket, unity government. If they thought the same way and had the same ideology on every single issue, this wouldn't be that interesting. So there is this meeting of the minds. It is important for the Kennedy supporters to have a voice in the room. They want Bobby to have a seat at the table to influence policy. They wouldn't need him there if Bobby and Trump were identical on every single issue.
And I mean, I guess, too, I'm just wondering kind of what this, does for the Harris campaign, because despite the fact that the official endorsement has been made to Donald Trump, it would seem as if a lot of people, average Americans, for example, who were looking to support Bobby because he represented kind of a new way of doing politics, people who are now just as, disenfranchised as they were before. Is there any world where a lot of the supporters go to Harris as opposed to Trump?
Look, I think some of the Kennedy supporters are going to go to Trump. Some are going to stay double haters, right? I don't like that term, but that's the term the media uses. They don't like the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. And then if you look at some of these polls, there are some RFK supporters who have gone to Kamala Harris. I think it's still incredibly early to see how things are going to shake out. I do believe the onus is going to be on Trump to win this election, in the same way I think the onus is on Kamala Harris to win. So an endorsement is great. Every little bit counts in these battleground states where it's razor thin, but the onus is ultimately on the candidates themselves to win or not.
Bobby said in an interview recently that he would be happy to serve in basically any position that Donald Trump would offer him, including CIA director, but that he believes, for example, the Senate would not actually be willing to confirm him, or the House of Representatives would not be willing to confirm him if Donald Trump made him the nominee for that position. What role do you see someone like a Bobby Kennedy holding in a potential Trump administration, and how does that kind of factor into the equation?
So I'm glad you asked this question. I've gotten this question almost every single day, and I always tell people I take things one step at a time. So we've got about 69 days until November 5th with the election. Let's focus on seeing who's going to win this election. And then we have the transition team. We've got a couple months till January and the inauguration to figure out what roles people are going to have. But I think right now the focus is just on who's going to win, and we're not even talking about roles in an administration yet, formal roles.
Well, then I guess, looking at it from a more current context, how can the
Hmm.
campaign use him throughout the campaign, whether it be surrogate roles or what have you? I mean, he was on Fox
Hmm.
News just on Sunday offering his
Hmm.
support to Donald Trump, talking about it in the way that any other, advisor or whatever to the campaign would be doing. How much will that kind of move the needle if you actually have RFK out there on some of these TV shows and podcasts and what have you, advocating for the former president?
So you only have to move the needle a little bit, and I think it will move the needle. If you look at a state like Arizona, back in 2020, there was 0.3% difference between Biden and Trump. So where it's extremely razor thin, you want to get that message out there.
All right, we'll leave it there. Link Lauren, thank you so much.